Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of Congregational Humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister. Welcome.
Welcome everyone to our weekly assembly on Sunday, January 24th, 2021. Whether this is your first visit or you've been with us for decades, we're glad that you are here as a part of our gathered community. As a part of keeping this community connected, we invite everyone to make use of the chat during assembly and to stop by our Zoom coffee hour immediately after assembly. The link for coffee hour will be in the chat, and you can also find it in recent emails from FUS. We have a new feature where you can choose your own breakout room, which is kind of fun. And you can stay as little or as long as you like. Our monthly theme for January is imagination. And here are some of the words of inaugural poet Amanda Gorman from her poem, The Hill We Climb. While democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. Come, let us gather in community.
Each week when we gather, we light our chalice and share one of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, or one of the aspirations of our congregation. This week we light the chalice remembering the 5th principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large.
Now for our congregational covenant. Love is the spirit of this place, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Hi, Rev David here, and I want to share with you today one of my favorite books. This month, we are talking about the theme of imagination, and I can't think of a better book about imagination than Duck Rabbit by Amy Krauss Rosenthal and Tim Lichtenheld, because it really makes a very interesting point about imagination and how different people have different kinds of thoughts in their imaginations. So Duck Rabbit. Hey, look, a duck. That's not a duck, that's a rabbit. Are you kidding me? It's totally a duck. It's for sure a rabbit. See, there's his bill. What are you talking about? Those are his ears, silly. It's a duck, and he's about to eat a piece of bread. It's a rabbit, and he's about to eat a carrot. Wait, listen, did you hear that? I heard duck sounds. That's funny. I distinctly heard rabbit sounds. Now the duck is wading through the swamp. No, the rabbit is hiding in the grass. There, see, it's flying. Flying? It's hopping. No, the rabbit is so hot, he's cooling off his ears. Look, the duck is so hot, he's getting a drink. Here, look at the duck through my binoculars. Sorry, still a rabbit. Here, ducky, ducky. Here, you cute little rabbit. Oh, great, you scared him away. I didn't scare him away. You scared him away. You know, maybe you were right. Maybe it was a rabbit. Thing is, now I'm actually thinking it was a duck. Well, anyway, now what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Hey, look, an anteater. That's no anteater. That's a brachiosaurus. The end. A little reflection about imagination and how we can see different things from different points of view.
What I like about being on the foundation is the camaraderie with the other members on the board. I am not somebody who joins the social hour after service. I am an introvert and I avoid those things like the plague, but I really have enjoyed getting to know other members of FUS.
I am a curious person, and so I like that on the board I can ask questions about many different areas about the functioning of FUS.
I really love getting to know a lot of the different people at FUS, and so really thinking about what their skills are, and I really enjoy helping people figure out how they could help FUS and get them more interested and embedded into the organization.
Hold your breath. Make a wish. Count to 3. Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. We'll begin with a spin, traveling in a world of my creation. What we'll see will defy explanation. If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to, do it. Want to change the world? There's nothing to it. There is no life I know to compare with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to.
After more than a century practicing congregational humanism and bridging the gap between the religious and secular worlds, First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis is still unique in our pursuit of a community that values and promotes the open-eyed and evidence-based free exchange of often dangerous ideas. Join us as we continue the search for truth, meaning, and justice, and help keep the voice of Unitarian Universalist humanism loud and strong by considering a gift. You can find us on PayPal, the Give Plus app, or firstunitarian.org/donate. Thank you.
Each week when we gather, we take a few moments to reflect on the joys, the sorrows, and the milestones of the human experience. We do this so that we stay in touch with our own humanity. We do this to remind ourselves of the value of a moment of stillness. And we do this so that no one among us is alone, either in celebrating joy or in facing the burdens of life. This week, we mourn the death and celebrate the life of Corin Arisian, who died January 14th at the age of 88 after a dignified battle with dementia. Reverend Arisian was the senior minister of this congregation from 1979 to 1997. He was a signer of the Third Humanist Manifesto. We are grateful for his humanist leadership at large and his service to First Unitarian Society. And we send our condolences to his wife, Lee McKay, and to all of his family. Members of FUS who have a copy of the directory can send cards to Lee at her home. Cards may also be sent to the FUS office for this and for any of the people that we talk about here. The online memorial service for member Barbara Blackstone will be held this coming Saturday, January 30th at 2 p.m. Note that there is a special obituary for Barbara in today's Star Tribune. Please watch the Friday emails this week for the Zoom link for her memorial. We now take a moment of silence to reflect on all of the challenges, the heartbreak, and the joy that are going on in our lives and in our world, and to think with gratitude of those who live lives of peace, justice, and compassion.
And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found our need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer.
Our reading today is an excerpt from We Are Falling on Our Face Because We Are Jumping High, an essay written this month by Arnand Girdardas. From time to time, I step back and try to remember where we are as a country on the arc of things. And I see then that this is both a very dark time and potentially a very bright time. It is important to hold these truths together. When I look down at the ground of the present right now, I feel depressed. If I lift my head to the horizon, I see a different picture. This is not the chaos of the beginning of something. This is the chaos of the end of something. Because the 40 years of this plutocratic takeover of the ideology that said, if you're torn between doing what's good for money and doing what's good for people, always do the thing that's good for money. On a good day, it all actually feels like it's burning down. And the Trump era doesn't have the crackle of a launch. It's been a mourning for white power, a mourning for a time when simply to be white and show up was enough, a mourning for an era in which simply to be a man, and not necessarily an especially capable one, could get you ahead of other people. We must understand that what we've been living through is backlash. Backlash. It's not the engine of history, it is the revolt against the engine of history. Then we might remember, just to pat ourselves on the back for a second, that what we are actually endeavoring to do right now is to become a kind of society that has seldom, if ever, existed in history, which is become a majority-minority democratic superpower. We are falling on our face because we are jumping very high right now. We are trying to do something that does not work in theory. To be a country of all the world, a country made up of all the countries, a country without a center of identity, without a default idea of what a human being is or looks like, without a shared religious belief, without a shared language that is people's first language at home. And what we're trying to do is awesome. It is literally awesome in the correct sense of that word. And therefore, the fact that we are having insurrections on the mall, or 4 years of an autocratic attempt, or racism oozing through the television and social media portals, these things are both terrifying and a completely predictable, inevitable result of people in power exploiting these transitional anxieties for their own pecuniary gain. And what we have to do is get smarter than these powerful people, get more organized than them, and understand that there is a different story to tell those who mistakenly went to the mall, and the 12% of Americans who actually supported that terrorist attack, and everybody else. A story to tell them about something great we are trying to do. We will actually create a country that's better for every single person. But we have to be willing to tell that story forcefully. We have to be willing to fight those people tooth and nail, and we have to fight to win. We are living through a revolt against the future. The future will prevail.
This is my role.
Jim, your audio.
There we go. We woke up on a Wednesday morning in Amarillo, Texas. This may sound like the first line of a country song, but for my partner and me, it was a reality. Amarillo was not so much a destination as a convenient stopping point on a long drive. And never having been there before, and thinking we might never get there again, we decided to seize the moment and go visit an iconic outdoor sculpture a few miles outside the city limits, Cadillac Ranch. If you're not familiar, Cadillac Ranch is an art installation that consists of 10 Cadillac sedans, partly buried on a pancake flat stretch of open land. First created in the 1970s, Cadillac Ranch has no visitor center, just some parking spots along a frontage road, and a narrow gate that lets human beings in but keeps any cattle from wandering out. The Cadillacs are ever changing in color. They're continuously repainted by visitors who are invited to add graffiti or messages or their own artistic touches. All this sounded good in my imagination. Cars that look like they fell out of the sky in formation, an art installation like no other in the world, and a chance for audience involvement. As strong winds propelled the two of us across the field and toward the Cadillacs, the reality turned out to be more complicated. The cars were in somewhat rough shape after being out in the weather for decades. But humans had clearly made things worse by making off with various parts of the cars. And on what was once pristine grassland, there was little grass and so much trash. Barbed wire along the road had caught countless plastic bags, which flapped in the breeze like a string of tattered pennants. Even more abundant were the empty spray paint cans, strewn everywhere and tossed in haphazard piles that shifted with the wind. The plastic caps from the cans, in whole or in fragments, were embedded in the dry soil in every direction. And the ground itself had been spray painted innumerable times in unrecognizable patterns. I tried to appreciate the spirit of imagination that had brought Cadillac Ranch into being. I tried to let the art take my mind in new directions. As I looked around, there was a word that I couldn't get out of my mind. Desecration. Desecration. Disregard for what was once beautiful land. Disregard for the art. Disregard for those with whom we share this world and those who will come after. As we trudged back to our car, we found ourselves leaning into the wind at an angle much like that of the Cadillacs. And as the gusts blew the noise from the interstate into our faces, I had to wonder, is there anything more American than desecration? This scene from Amarillo is not an old road trip memory from decades past. This story took place right here in 2021, our shaky new year. As we drove away from Cadillac Ranch that afternoon and headed deeper into the American West, my phone started giving us breaking news from back east. Armed insurgents storm U.S. Capitol. Senators taken to secure location. Shots fired. My partner and I had been gazing at the Cadillacs. Washington, D.C. had plummeted into chaos. Historic windows smashed, lawmakers in hiding, human bodies beaten and killed. The question was not even an hour old. Is there anything more American than desecration? And here was another answer. Our theme this month here at the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis is imagination. And today I want to look at how imagination can have tremendous power, both as a force for good and a force for evil. Imagination can be essential to success, and when imagination fails us, the effects can be devastating. And imagination is everywhere right now, from those who embrace preposterous yet deadly conspiracy theories to those who are trying to imagine the good that might come of these next 4 years. It's a good time to reflect on imagination. Let's continue along in the car for a bit on the road trip that my partner and I took earlier this month. I should mention that we traveled with the pandemic foremost in mind. No airplanes or airports or indoor restaurants, no staying with relatives or having meals at the kitchen table of friends. We wore our N95 masks into every grocery store and rest area. There were a couple of afternoons when we visited distanced and outdoors with a few relatives at a time. Otherwise, we kept up our pandemic regimen of isolation. But you can't isolate from the news when your country's in turmoil. As we continued to drive on the afternoon of January 6th, the Texas Panhandle gave way to New Mexico's extinct volcano cones and snowy mountain peaks. We found ourselves surrounded by beauty and grandeur that contrasted so starkly with the unfolding horrors at the Capitol. As someone who's been following authoritarianism's rise in the US for the past 5 years, I was shocked by some of the brazenness of the attack that day and by the poor security preparation. But overall, I was not surprised by the actions of the mob. The values underneath the insurrection have been in place for a long time. White supremacy, patriarchy, violence, desecration. Authoritarians love those things. They're useful for incitement. And chaos and suffering are tools that demagogues like to wield to help them stay in power. As we listened to the news coverage, a famous quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came into my mind. A riot is the language of the unheard. A riot is the language of the unheard. I pondered this for a bit. The people in the mob at the Capitol had hardly been unheard. They were hardly marginalized, yet there they were by the thousands in what was being described as a riot. I soon came to realize that Dr. King's quote was not wrong. Rather, what was wrong was the use of the word riot to describe the day's events. This was not a riot, not a spontaneous outpouring of anger in the streets. It was a highly coordinated terrorist attack by armed men who hoped to carry out assassinations. And they were able to get as far as they did in part because some Capitol officials had a failure of imagination. I'll admit, as a person who's imagined a number of terrifying scenarios over the past 4 years, I had not imagined that one. But I have gotten used to the idea that human cruelty shows up in ways most of us might not imagine. The same road trip that took us through Amarillo also had taken us through Tulsa, where my partner lived for a few years when he was a kid. Back at that time, no one in their family had ever heard about the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, in which a white mob killed as many as 300 African American citizens and burned to the ground dozens of blocks of Black-owned businesses and homes. This massive massacre became a secret, one that was buried and rarely discussed for most of a century. Notably, when the massacre began to come out of the shadows and grow in the public consciousness in the past couple of decades, it was first referred to as the Tulsa Race War or Race Riot, as though there may have been very fine people on both sides. In more recent years, it has been appropriately called a massacre. I first learned about the massacre while I was in seminary, and it was something neither I nor my partner's family ever would have imagined. And after all that silence, Tulsa now has monuments and interpretive signs to bear witness and to tell the story to residents and visitors. The massacre is now an accepted part of Tulsa's history, and the reckoning is ongoing. Complete destruction of Tulsa's Black Wall Street by resentful whites is part of our long national tradition of pathological, often racialized greed. John Geerdardas described this ethic in our reading. Torn between doing what's good for money and what's good for people, always do what's good for money. He was describing the prevalent politics of the past 40 years, but it's also the politics of the past 400 years. And it was on vivid and deadly display these past 4 years. We're all right now just emerging from the trauma of seeing what happens when our country is given over so completely to greed and lust for power. The result is desecration and death on an epic scale. We do need to talk about what happened these past 4 years, to accept the reality of all that took place, to not sweep it under the rug. The current calls for unity fairly raise the question, unity with whom? White supremacists? As many voices have been saying these past few weeks, there can be no healing without accountability, and there is much work to do. At the same time, we can use this transition to reorient our imagination. We might continue to be surprised by the horrors of the past as they are revealed, but we need not spend energy trying to imagine them. When a hard new truth is uncovered, we can welcome it and be grateful for the knowledge and begin the reckoning from there. We might best use our imaginations to conceive of a more peaceful and life-sustaining present and future, and what it might take to get there. And our collective and individual imaginations might have some recovery to do. As Michelle Goldberg wrote in the New York Times in October, a perpetual state of emergency isn't healthy or sustainable. Living in Trump's panic-inducing eternal present is bad for art, but it's also bad for imagination more broadly, including the imagination needed to conceive a future in which Trumpism is unthinkable. She concluded with this: every moment spent thinking about him is a moment that could have been spent contemplating, creating, or appreciating something else. He has blocked out the sun. Only when he's gone will we see how much we've been missing. This past Wednesday, a Wednesday very different from the one 2 weeks before, the sun came out, shining a bright light on what we've been missing. Being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. That was one of the many frequently quoted lines from The Hill We Climb, the inauguration poem by Amanda Gorman, whose blossoming art blessed the occasion. She challenged each of us to be the light the country needs, and she was a bright voice herself. After watching her, I realized that all my imaginings about Inauguration Day had been about what could go wrong. I had not reoriented my imagination to conceive of how much might be beautiful. Now, many of us may be understandably wary of being optimistic. Congregants I spoke with this past week had a range of feelings about the turn of events, from tremendous relief to a distrust that things are truly going to be better. But I've decided that I'm going to dare to do some positive. The Earth's climate is in serious trouble, but our government is now acting in ways that will actually help. Migrant children will no longer have their lives jeopardized by the federal government to be used as political pawns. The pandemic, while still in its worst phases, is being addressed with science, and lives will be saved. And the new president named white supremacy as something that must be confronted and defeated. Now, this new administration is still made up of many privileged politicians who will sometimes need to be nudged, cajoled, and pressured to do the right thing. But my core humanist values around human dignity and care for the earth and for each other are more likely to be upheld by my country now, lessening the fear and dissonance and helplessness and trauma. We know there are still no miracles and there are no miracle workers. We know that all the factors that brought us to the January 6th revolt against the future are far from being resolved. We know there are still tens of millions of people living in imaginary, death-dealing worlds of conspiracy theories. But we can choose to try to imagine better days ahead. I want to share a few thoughts from Eleanor Westerly, a Twin Cities activist and communications strategist. She talks about how the theft of imagination is part of an intentional strategy by those who benefit from the status quo, in order to keep things as they are, in order to keep people from hoping and dreaming and working against the systems that may hold us back in this life. Westerly points out that mere negation and critique are not enough to move the world forward. She first shared these words on the eve of the previous inauguration, and they are just as true and helpful today. For my entire life, she says, I have experienced individuals, organizations, movement moments, political leaders, academic thinkers, media outlets, even artists and visionaries, proclaiming everything that we're against. I have been a part of this chorus, and this articulation is absolutely, inarguably necessary. It has to happen. It's obligatory. She continues, the people who currently dominate political and economic power have absolutely no trouble or hesitation articulating exactly the reality they're looking for. It's one where every single person is completely on their own, and if you have lots of money and power, that means you're a great person and deserve more money and power. And if you don't have lots of money and power, that means you're worthless and deserve nothing. We can win, Westerly continues, only if we tell the story out loud again and again and again of the world that we want to live in, the world that we're striving to create, of its sights and sounds and smells and feelings and experiences and relationships. We can win only if we treat this world as a reality we're aiming for and a goal for us to orient toward, an actual destination that's possible for us to reach. And the way we reach it is through all of the work that we're all doing, day in and day out. We can win only if we can communicate what's vibrant and present and full in this reality that we're striving to create. Westerly's thoughts are echoed in those of Anand Giridharadas. There is a different story to tell, a story about something we are trying to do. We will actually create a country that's better for every single person. But we have to be willing to tell that story forcefully. So as we move forward from this historic week, may the sacred spaces of our minds never again be desecrated by profane leadership. May we listen to every true story and clearly share our own visions for the world we want. And may we fully re-energize the positive sides of our imaginations. As Amanda Gorman put it in her stunning poem, somehow we weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And you and I know that the work and the imagining are ours to do.
Join me from home in our extinguishing the chalice words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. All of these we carry in our hearts and in our minds until we are together again.
Oh,
Thanks so much for joining us today as we embark on a new era of working for justice and peace. As the transcendentalist and abolitionist Unitarian minister Theodore Parker wrote, "Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. So may it be."
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.